It's not even that I need them to understand why I left Christianity, because they'll believe what they want to believe. And for most people, they're going to believe whatever fits into their pre-existing narratives and worldview. But if they were going to believe me on one thing, it's that the peace that surpasses all understanding that supposedly God promises is something accessible to each and every one of us, and is not dependent on religion.
Hello and welcome to Secular Spotlight. I'm Nancy Noet. I'm a litigation attorney here at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. A lot of us at FFRF, grew up in a religious household, eventually found a path to a secular life. Everyone's story is different, but today we are here with Daniel Dossey, who is a legal intake assistant here. Joined us maybe a year and a half ago or ish. He'll fill that in. But I've been wanting to do this, and the FFRF has been wanting to do this for a while, to tell a story of how Daniel came through a religious upbringing, some pain, in fact, a lot of pain associated with that, found his way out on the other end to a secular, happy life. And he's going to share with us how he got there, what it was like on the bad side and now on the good side. So with that out of the way, welcome to Secular Spotlight, and welcome, Daniel. Thank you for doing this today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you and I have talked a little bit about, before we were going to sit down and do this, telling your story, and I really do appreciate it because it's an important one. There are people out there like you, not like you, who are going to hear some things today, I think, that will be very illuminating. And, you know, if it helps understanding, whether they are in a position where they're, know somebody, love somebody like you, or whether they are somebody like you, I hope it's information that they can take away and make good use of, because you are important and your story is important.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wish that I had more people in the public sphere, I think, who had stories and they were willing to share and stuff. So I think that's why I'm excited to do this too, just to, I don't know, let other people know that if they're going through the similar struggles that I've gone through, that, yeah, there are other people like them, and there's also hope on the other side. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start there. You're young Daniel. Where were you living as a child? What was it like? And then we'll work into how religion played a role there and eventually through into adulthood.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in East Texas in a city called Tyler, Texas. Lived there pretty much my whole life until I went to college. But yeah, I went to the same church growing up. It was called Glenwood Church of Christ. We sang a cappella, so if you're not familiar with Church of Christ, think Southern Baptist, but no instruments. Historically, a lot of people have thought that if you use instruments, you're going to hell and all that good stuff. It's kind of a intense denomination, but ours was chilled out. I want to say I had a very, in general, loving church community, and I would still say that a lot of people who went there, I'm still in contact with now, and I think they were very formative in just how I grew up and stuff. But I think that was a huge blessing, and something that made my story a little different was that I never felt harmed by the church. If anything, it felt like the church itself mitigated the harm done from the evangelical religion and doctrines itself. I think around 5th grade is whenever I started having religious anxiety. That was around the time that I started realizing that I was gay and attracted to guys, and I started thinking I don't know, just more about sin and hell in general, because nobody talked about being gay. Nobody talked about it at my church, or I also went to an evangelical school my whole life, the same one from 2nd grade to whenever I graduated. But nobody talked about being gay. It was just kind of a thing that was a sin and it didn't happen to anybody in our community. That was something that people chose. That was something that only happened whenever you were living a life that was filled with sin apart from Christ. So yeah, around 5th grade, I think, puberty is happening and all the feelings are coming up.
So I just want to stop you for a second. So you said it wasn't talked about.
Yes.
But I feel like what you mean is you didn't feel free to talk about the fact that you were going through this and having these feelings.
Yes.
You didn't think it was okay. So it was talked about. It was wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a theme, sadly, with a fair amount of religion. And I don't want to bash everybody. There are good people out there. We count on them. Without the allies, you and I are both members of the LGBTQ plus community. We need the allies, because if we could get to equality and how things should be on our own, we would have done it a long time ago. It didn't happen, and here we are. So it was talked about. It was wrong. So tell me a little bit about that. You're a kid. You knew it was wrong to be gay. Describe your life as a kid in a conservative religious upbringing.
Yeah.
What was life like at home? How did you know it was wrong to be gay?
Yeah. Well, I want to say it was in subtle ways, but none of it was subtle exactly. I think anytime that, to this day, like if my parents like see like a gay couple in public, or if there's a commercial with a gay couple, like audibly there will be at least one ugh or like a comment on like every single, like there can never, especially like on television and in media, it can never just like pass by. There always had to be like a very, very negative comment to it. And so that's what I grew up hearing. It was less explicit in the words spoken about it. I didn't hear much of, this is what being gay is. It's whenever blah, 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 blah. If there was ever like a situation, it's like, ugh, like, oh, I can't believe they would do that, and then never talked about. So yeah, it was very kind of confusing whenever like I started being attracted to guys also, and I was like, what is this? And yeah, didn't feel comfortable at all to talk to my family or yeah, anybody at my school about it either.
How about in church? How you must have known it was wrong there too. I think that's the message I get.
Yeah.
So how did you know it was wrong there?
Honestly, the fear from my church was a lot less visceral than the fear of my parents finding out from somebody in the church. I actually, once again, kind of feel like an outlier here in a lot of ways, because a lot of people at my church were kind of in hiding non-evangelicals, if that makes sense. But our core doctrines at our church were pretty evangelical and conservative, and a lot of the body was very conservative, especially the people whom my family spent time around. But outside of that, I oddly always felt like I had a lot of people whom, if I really wanted to talk about it, that I would have support, not necessarily in being gay, because I was planning on being celibate until I was 22, but support in...
What you mean is, until you were 22, your plan for life was to be celibate because being gay is wrong.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Exactly. But yeah, I feel like my youth minister and my youth minister's wife, shout out Stephen and Celesta, I think I'm still very close with them, actually. And one time whenever I was 17, I went on a hiking trip with my youth group. And I remember my youth minister like sitting with me. We were at a pizza place, and he said something to me along the lines of, it seems like you are harboring a secret or something that you haven't told anybody, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm always here for you and you can always talk to me about it if you ever want to. And I just thanked him for it and acted like I didn't know what he meant, probably. I don't exactly remember. But it was always that kind of implicit support from the broader church community, we had about 1,000 people, maybe like 800 to 1,000. But yeah, I just wasn't really ready to talk about it, and I didn't really think that it mattered since my plan for life was to never act on it.
Okay, and I'm going to circle back a little bit. I thought I heard you say, that being gay and recognizing that sort of started your journey toward questioning what religion was telling you, not just about your sexuality, but in general.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. No, for sure.
So tell me about that.
Yeah.
Tell me about that arc. How do you, 5th grade, you're starting to have feelings. Tell me how you get to the part where, and I know there are details, and we'll get to how it happens.
Sure.
But how does that start you on your road toward, my family and my church are telling me I am wrong for who I am.
Yeah, for sure.
And now I think that maybe that's not okay. And so maybe others. So talk about
Sure.
that.
So me being gay and knowing from around the age of elementary, I think just pushed me to think about religion a lot harder because the stakes felt a lot higher for me, that if I specifically slipped up and made a mistake or decided to follow it sounds very, very like evangelical language, but like my sexual desires, that I could literally end up like burning for an eternity and like a literal eternity of suffering. And
And be clear,
yes.
you believed that.
Yes,
Okay.
100%. And so I was terrified. I was terrified of myself. I was terrified of my own mind. I was terrified of my parents if they were, I don't know if they would, but just they never told me that they wouldn't, but just the fear of conversion therapy and all of these things. And it was just once again never talked about. So all of that to say, me being gay really, really, really pushed me to think a lot about the religion and what hell means. And yeah, so I think that that's kind of where the initial fear of hell came from. So around 15, I developed OCD pretty badly, and it was filled with a lot of mental fears and hyperfixations on specific scenarios that like could happen in the future that I couldn't disprove whatever happened. And they didn't start out religious in theme. I think to make it more concrete, one of the first ones was like, what if my mom gets breast cancer and then dies, even though she didn't have any symptoms, she didn't have like anything, like there was nothing that would make me think logically she has breast cancer, but it was like this OCD thing that like I would wake up and I would have like a second of peace, and then my mind would just like spiral down this thing, and it would be like the only thought that I had in my mind. And that's just kind of how my OCD worked. And with OCD, it's like until you feel comfortable putting it aside, that is kind of the hyperfixation, and your body is like on overdrive trying to solve it and figure it out. So for me, I had a lot of mental compulsions related to analyzing and trying to figure it out so I could put one aside just for another fear to pop up. And so I actually went to a Christian therapist for a while for this type of OCD. And
it was it because your family wanted you to have, or you wanted to have a Christian therapist, or at that point, because you and I have talked about this, and I think your OCD is very much tied to your religious experience and what that did to you.
Exactly.
So is that why you sought out this first therapist, or no?
It like didn't even occur to me that I would ever see a non-Christian therapist, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah. It was just kind of, oh, you need a therapist, you need mental health, like help, you go to a Christian. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it was recommended to us by somebody in our church too. So I started seeing this person, and eventually how I learned to, which is terrible psychological advice for a variety of reasons, but I learned to set aside each of these anxieties that would come up in my brain by coming up with a worst case scenario, which was always, even if this happens, heaven is next. And so, yes, it's actually crazy. It's like that in and of itself is a compulsion in order to satisfy the anxiety. So, shocker, what eventually happens is the question becomes, what if heaven isn't next? And it's like anybody could have seen this coming, like hindsight's 2020, whatever. I was like 16, but I don't know why my psychologist didn't really see this coming. But I was in Honduras on a mission trip, fast forward to 17, and we were on the bus, like up the mountain, going to go proselytize, and it was like a medical mission trip too. But anyways, we were going up the mountain and we were on this bus, and I remember sitting back and thinking, what if I am called to be a missionary and either A, I don't know, or B, I somehow do know, but then don't follow through? Will I go to hell for that? And that kind of started me down the path of this like constant religious OCD of like, for the next couple years, it was literally like playing whack-a-mole. Like it's like, is this a sin? And then I would research and research and research. And I still in my phone have about 153 long notes, which is all of the compulsive analyzing to try and get myself to a point of like, either this is a sin and I won't commit it by doing A, B, or C, or this isn't a sin, so then you can set it aside. And so, yeah, it became literally whack-a-mole for the next couple years, and that was absolute hell to try and always, I mean, because the Bible isn't exactly logically coherent, and I think that that's kind of what I started to see for a long answer to your question.
No, I mean, that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I asked it. So where is your family in this? They're aware, I assume, you're seeking counseling.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do they know why? I mean, did any of what you just told me register with them in any way, shape, or form? Or are they just thinking, oh, Daniel's, a sad teenager and needs some help?
Sure. That's kind of how my dad saw it, but my mom was actually very, very, I think, supportive to the best of her abilities. I would sit with her many, many nights, especially my senior year in high school, and I would just be like crying my eyes out, like trying to solve another sin or like solve something that felt so unsolvable because one verse said this and another verse said this.
And what are these sins,
yeah.
by the way? I mean, I don't imagine this is just you confessing to your mother, although it probably happened at some point, about your sexuality. What are all these sins that you're obsessively churning in your mind?
Sure. The Bible is like, don't be jealous, even though God is a jealous God. Like, don't covet, don't do all of these things, but there aren't exactly guidelines on how not to feel your own emotions. So with don't be jealous, all of a sudden I was thrust into this kind of paradigm where I guess if I felt jealousy come up, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my goodness, am I being jealous? Like, am I sinning? Like, how do I know whenever jealousy is just an emotion and I can't control it, like based on what we know from psychological research? Or how do I know if God just wants me to completely turn it off? What does turning it off mean? What is not being jealous? Why should I not be jealous if God is a jealous God? Is there a righteous jealousy? And just down that line. And so there are so many different things. And so the day that I graduated high school actually was like a terrible day for me. Like I came home and I had my little like high school senior party, and then yeah, I just remember going back into my room and like crying for hours because I was stuck on the sin of lust, and like regardless of me being gay, it's like normal sexual attraction exists, and how do we know what qualifies as lust? How do we know like what's the difference between attraction and lust? And then also what Christians say is lust is also just a normal human experience of sexual desire that is literally based on like our evolution and in order to get us to reproduce in general. And so it's like, of course this is like going on, but And so it's like all of these things I cannot figure out, A, how to not commit a sin, but B, the rationale behind it. Like the more and more that I searched, the more and more nothing made sense. And so I was 18 and I thought this was going to be like a short little OCD thing. It was okay, a lot of people believe in evolution. Like, what is this about? Let's do a quick Google search, just get it out of the mind, and then we can be like, okay, this is how you disprove evolution. This is why it's not real. I started looking into it.
Because you were raised to believe evolution was not a thing.
Yes. And in fact, my freshman year biology class, we skipped the first, like, quite a few chapters of our biology textbook because, and I quote,
just skip it.
Yes, you really think we were raised from apes is like what we were told. And I was like, I guess that makes sense.
Do you really think someone up in the sky made Adam and Eve? I mean,
yeah.
I digress.
No, sure. But yeah, so I didn't believe in evolution. I think by the time that I graduated, I was one of probably 5 people in my graduating class. It was, albeit a small class, there are about 75 of us. But probably one of 5 people who thought that evolution was real.
Okay, so before we get there, I just want to wrap up. You had these conversations with your mother, in tears, because every little feeling, every little thing that makes you a human being, frankly, is put you in petrifying fear of eternal damnation.
Yes.
Sexuality aside, it's everything, and you're telling this to your mother. I assume you had similar conversations with your therapist. So, what in general was Mom's response, if any, and how did that play out with your Christian therapist? Then we're going to get to 18 and how things evolve.
Sure. I believed at that time what my mom believed, and so I think we both thought that A, it was a test from the devil, and B, that it was a very serious mental health condition that was intersecting with religion.
So what was the test from the devil? You feeling this way, or you having these feelings of gee whiz, I was a little bit jealous the other day when you took my brother to McDonald's and I didn't get to go, or whatever jealousy thought you're having. Was that the test from the devil? Yeah,
I think all of it we viewed as a test, because I think that we always had hope that it would eventually make my faith stronger and that I would be like a greater influence for, you name it. If my faith is become stronger, if I get out of this horrible OCD and like what we both recognize as like a horrible time, then how much good can A, I eventually do, or B, even if I never get out of it, how much greater will my like reward be in heaven? So
believe better, have better faith, Daniel, and everything will work out, is what Mom is telling you.
That was a lot of what my community taught me, but honestly, my mom was pretty supportive. Like, I really am very, very, very grateful for her while I was going through that. I think it kind of tested her faith a little bit also, and I think that she also, from seeing how I was interacting with this, I think it really, really changed her perception on what mental illness is in general, but it didn't seem to change that faith. She didn't necessarily think that faith, like that I should have just stronger faith and it would just solve my OCD, but it's almost like in viewing that, we both viewed it as like these two separate entities that didn't interact. It was like the OCD is causing this, the OCD is causing my horrible mind, and at the same time, faith is good, Christianity is inherently good, Christianity and God are not causing this, but I understand it within the logical paradigm of evangelical Christianity, but it's like outside of that paradigm, I mean, I don't understand how we didn't see how it's not even like these two things are intersecting. It's like they are one and the same. Like my OCD was not this separate thing that happened independently of faith. Like my OCD was happening because of my faith, and that was something that I don't think that she was willing to recognize. Yeah.
Was your therapist?
No, she was pretty much the exact same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just, hang in there. Faith will help.
Yeah.
And then someday you'll get yours, and the meek shall inherit the earth, and all of that
Yeah.
good stuff, so to speak. Okay.
Pretty much.
So 18, you want to go to 18.
Sure.
And well, that's where you started.
Yes.
So what happens at 18 on your journey?
Yes.
You've explained the struggle kind of leading up to that
Yes.
point. And of course we get to a place, and I don't remember, how old were you in 2020?
I was 19 for most of it.
Okay, so the struggle is still ongoing, and we'll get to 18 leading up to that. But you and I have talked about this, so I'm going to out you a little bit. You voted for Donald Trump.
I did.
You believed, and I think that was somewhat tied to your religious
Yes, 100%.
faith.
In
Okay.
fact, I was pretty much a one-issue voter. I thought that if I voted for Biden, that I would be committing a heinous sin, because it was all pretty much surrounded by abortion. Killing babies was in my mind. And so for Trump, I didn't like him, and I didn't support a lot of his policies in general, but it was abortion, and it was like the moral arguments that he obviously is like manipulating and working with evangelicals to work within, that I voted for him. Yeah, it's almost like the worst of both worlds. I was economically liberal at the time, but socially conservative, which you don't hear very often.
Okay, so and you're going to school at that point,
Yes,
right? We're in
yes,
college.
yes.
And where are you in college?
I went to a small school out in West Texas. It was called Abilene Christian University.
Okay, so a Christian university. And what were you studying?
I was studying my degrees in psychology, and then I got a minor in biblical studies.
Okay, so you're taking some biblical studies courses.
Yes.
All right. So what's happening with 18, 19-year-old Daniel? It was a sin to vote for Biden, and I understand. Abortion is very much often anyway tied up with religion in this way.
Yes.
I don't think that's unique.
Yes.
But talk about how your schooling plays out, and where you're starting, I think, to question more.
Yes.
The religious beliefs. How did that happen?
Yeah, for sure. The summer before I went to college, actually, I ended up getting on like a pretty heavy med. It was an antipsychotic in order to just calm me down quite a bit. And it worked. About within 2 weeks, my nervous system, I felt like I could finally take a breath. And I was obviously very, very traumatized from the last 2 to 3 years of just relentless, every single day, a ridiculously high level of anxiety. I was probably on average daily, around from 0 to 10 on the anxiety scale, it was probably around an 8 to 10 for most days of the last 3 years. And so anyways, I got on an antipsychotic, and within 2 weeks, I was suddenly at around a 4. And I started to feel like I could take a breath, but I just didn't want to even think anymore about religion. I had dealt with so many sins. I still at the time would have considered myself to have a relationship with God, and a very close relationship with God, but I wasn't yet ready to analyze the past 3 years and how that had affected me in any way. It was kind of okay, we have a good relationship with God. My OCD is gone. My faith is quite different than it was, but to God be the glory for Abilify, the antipsychotic, and let's go to college.
How was your faith different? Was it just that you felt calmer and had less intrusive thoughts about the rabbit holes, it sounds like, of, well, if I feel jealous about this, that's a sin, and what's going to happen to me, and that kind of thing. So you're not churning like that.
Yes.
But you said your faith was different. How was it different at that point?
It was different in ways that I don't think I was willing to confront. But I think for most people who are Christians, and especially people who are raised Christian, there's this kind of naive sense that Christianity in and of itself will solve all of your problems, that there's a big emphasis in the communities that I was raised within and tangential to, that mental health is a spiritual struggle instead of, something physiological. And even whenever I was younger, I believed that why is anybody depressed? Why is anybody anxious? All you have to do is like trust in God more and then that'll go away. But most people don't grow out of that. And this is what I would have said at 18. I would have said, it changed my faith because I think it is more mature. I have learned what it means to truly rely on God and get out the other side. And now I'm using this experience to become a Christian counselor. I wanted to go to seminary after college. I wanted to go to Dallas Theological Seminary and then become like a biblical counselor to help people who were struggling with religious OCD. So in my mind, it was this neat little bow on this traumatic time in my life that I was going to be able to use for God's glory is what was conscious in my mind and the answer that I probably would have given you. But in reality, how it changed my faith was, I don't know, you don't go through something like that's that traumatic in your mind that is so deeply intertwined without associating that thing with at least a little bit of fear. It's hard to describe, but there was a different quality to my faith that included, I think, a lot more, just a lot more fear in general, and made me fear my own mind and not be able to trust myself in general.
So that changed at some point.
Yeah.
So walk me up to, I want you to walk me up to, do you have an aha moment?
Yes.
All right. Walk me up to that.
Okay.
How you got there, and then we're gonna hit the big aha moment.
Sure.
Because that's important. I
Sure.
think.
So my Bible class my freshman year, it was the New Testament, I think is what it was, or maybe it was the Gospels. It was something. But my professor, our first lesson was on the synoptic problem, which is basically the synoptic Gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They have basically like identical, like if you look at the original Greek, it is written verbatim, like the exact same in so many different passages. And so it seems like blah, blah, blah. It's like we started looking at these problems that were in the Bible without the evangelical resolutions that were always there. It was very, very, very much a minor constructed on the construction of the Bible from an academic viewpoint, instead of at my Christian school, we took apologetics classes, which we weren't A, taught about these problems, but B, if it ever came up, it would be briefly glanced over just to get to the evangelical solution and why it doesn't matter. So all of that to say, that's kind of how all of my Bible classes functioned. And so basically the aha moment, I was actually sitting in my Old Testament class. Mm-hmm. I wrote I think it was a 12-page paper on why homosexuality is wrong according to the Bible, because one of my professors seemed to think that it was okay. And so for my honors project, I literally wrote an entire research paper on why it was a sin, because I was like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, this is why it's a sin. Anyways, so I get to my Old Testament class, and I remember my teacher saying that the book of Job was written as a polemic against the retributive theology of Proverbs, and no one needs to understand exactly what that means.
I don't.
Yeah. But basically, whenever he said that, my view of the Bible completely changed, because basically I was learning more and more throughout all of my Bible classes that univocality, the belief that the Bible speaks with one coherent voice, was objectively not true, as shown in just one example, through the books of like Job and Proverbs, because in Judaism, often one book was written to provide an alternative theological explanation to somebody else's opinion that was in another book in the Bible. But within evangelical Christianity, what we're taught is that every single thing that is in the Bible, they are all coinciding. They all make sense. They are all univocal. They all speak with one voice. And what I finally grasped in that moment, and why I had religious OCD for so long is because I could not put these two conflicting opinions together. But in that class that day, my sophomore year of college, I was finding like, oh, I cannot put these conflicting ideas together because they are literally meant to be conflicting, because Judaism functioned in a different way than Christianity did. There was a reason why there were less than 1,000 Jewish converts by the end of the first century, and it's because they are two completely different religions that Christians say is just a continuation of Judaism. So all of that to say, I started learning more and more and more about Judaism, and I started learning more about the conceptions of the afterlife and how we came from how Jews viewed this place called Sheol, which was their afterlife where everybody went, to eventually the Hellenization of the Jews, and how Christians started to believe that that there was a heaven and a hell and the afterlife, and seeing the man-made origins of not only the religion, but this conception of an afterlife that I had feared for years and years. And to understand, not just logically, but viscerally in my own body, that everything that I have feared, everything that I have come to conclusions, everything that I've been basing my life on, at the time I was still planning on going to seminary to become a Christian counselor, had man-made origins in a way that I'd always been taught that was not true, that was heretical, that God was in charge of the Bible, that God was in charge of every single part of it. And for all of that to suddenly, slowly fall apart, fast forward a little bit, on May 20th of 2022, I call it my anti-baptism, if you will, I had done a lot of research and I'd been documenting it for a very, very, very long time. And at that point, I barely had faith in even a God figure, much less any evangelical teaching within the Bible. I had deconstructed all of the messianic prophecies. I deconstructed, yes, like I said, the ideas of heaven and hell. I looked into the intertestamental texts between the Old Testament and the New Testament and what they reveal about Judaism and how Christians view Jesus. And I came across this article on religious trauma, and I was like, oh, this fits. And there was a sentence in it, and it said, if you find yourself keep coming back to Christianity only as a result of fear, that is not true faith. That is simply a result of biological trauma that you think you cannot escape. And I read that and everything clicked. I already logically did not believe, but I was only holding on nominally to the term Christianity because I was still internally, physiologically scared of eternal punishment, as anybody would be whose nervous system was raised on that for 20 years.
That's how control works.
Yes, exactly. And so that day, May 20th of 22, I was like, that makes sense. I went
shackles off.
Yes. I went down a checklist. I was like, do I believe in the Trinity? No, I think it was a political move at the Council of Nicaea. Do I believe blah, 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 blah? And then eventually, my last question for myself was, do I believe in God? I was like, no. Why would I? It doesn't even, for me, it did not seem to make sense, and I had nothing holding me to that belief anymore. And then I was like, I don't think I'm a Christian. And it was that night, I can't remember exactly what I searched up on Google right after, but it was May 20th of 2022. I was looking up something along the lines of freedom from religion, and that was the day that I found this organization. And I think since then, I joined FFRF in May of 2022 after kind of explaining some of this to just a random person who worked here at the time, Matt Langer, who's now my supervisor. But I reached out to him and told him some of this and how FFRF had been like my dream organization for years at this point. And I just feel like so incredibly grateful to like this feeling and this experience is exactly what I would have said in another life of how God works all things for good. But without God, it's just like the crazy story. Like I went from being this traumatized evangelical to working for like this organization that I found the day that I left Christianity, and now I get to have a job that I just find so fulfilling, and am able to help just anybody in the way that I wish that I had been helped as well. Yeah.
Well, you're making me cry a little bit, but I'm a crier. That's not a bad thing. Daniel, you are a ray of sunshine, and we could not be more thrilled to have you here. Let's just wrap up with a little, like, how have things been since May 20th of 2022?
Yeah, they've not been without struggles, especially with my family and telling them that I wasn't Christian, that at the time I had a boyfriend, that I now work for, just the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That has been hard, but in general, I didn't even know that, for me personally, that this amount of peace and joy would even be possible. I think that I've never felt more free in my life, and there was something about leaving Christianity fully without holding on to any part of it that just completely changed my mind. There's something about going through all of that just mind trauma related to religion, coming out on the other side and not even having a semblance anymore of, what if I go to hell for this? What if I'm wrong? What if by me being an atheist, what if by me working for an atheist organization, what if I'm wrong? What if I go to hell? Just all of it is gone. I never thought that would be possible, and I've never been happier in my life. And it's to the point where, like, I'm not even scared of death. Like, I was scared of eternal suffering for so long. It's like, even if I die tomorrow, even if something happens to me, even if my life isn't going according to any plans that I have set, that's all okay, because it's like, one day this ends, and the most that I can do within this time is try and help other people, try and live a good life, not based on morality given to me by this ancient book and these insane ideas. But yeah, I'm doing really well.
What would you tell your parents and other people of faith, whether it's Christianity or otherwise, what would you have them understand about your experience and where you sit now that you think they just don't get?
I think that people in my community, the very simple explanation for how I got here is, oh, he's gay, he wanted to sin, so now he is rebelling against God. It's just like, I'm sorry, it's just like so ridiculous. Like, what are we doing? But it's not even that I need them to understand why I left Christianity, because they'll believe what they want to believe. And for most people, they're going to believe whatever fits into their pre-existing narratives and worldview. But if they were going to believe me on one thing, it's that there is an ability to feel this deep-rooted, weighted sense of peace and fulfillment that even whenever I was a Christian and would have said that I felt these feelings from God, it was always tinged with anxiety. I mean, whenever the consequence for not believing is literally eternal punishment for you, or if you're sure that you're going to heaven for anybody else, I don't think that there can be the fullness of peace from somebody that's on the other side. And so, yeah, not even that I'm trying to convert them or make them leave Christianity, but just to help them understand that the peace that surpasses all understanding that supposedly God promises is something accessible to each and every one of us and is not dependent on religion.
Okay, well, I want to thank you again.
Thank you.
For sharing your story, because it's such an important one and it's a brave thing to do. I hope everyone learned something. I always learn something when I talk to you. But this has been a great episode. It wraps things up for this episode. If you're interested in hearing more about deconversion stories like Daniel's or from other people on our staff, because everyone's got a story, let us know in the comments. If you want to support our mission, consider becoming a member. We're always looking for new people to join. Look us up at ffrf.org. Like this episode, smash that button and subscribe. I often don't like those messages and videos, but it really is important to keep this kind of thing coming. And hopefully we can improve and get you more good content in the future. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
I'm Chris Calvey, and I am proud to be an out-of-the-closet atheist. Atheists are sometimes accused of leading lives that are cold and bleak and meaningless. To me, I don't believe that there's an afterlife. And that realization that this might be the only chance we have makes my life feel incredibly important every day.